China is a potential adversary. They're doing a lot of things well. They have a lot of problems. What I really worry about is us.
Welcome, this is Najma Minhas with GBS Deep Dive. In another tit-for-tat exchange between the two superpowers, China and United States. On Monday, China reacted strongly to comments by the US president that he made on Friday, saying that China had totally violated its agreement with us. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. And he threatened that the United States would take strong measures to defend its interests. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has also made similar comments, to the effect saying that China has not been a reliable partner and claimed that it was holding back products in the global supply chain. In response, China's Ministry of Commerce said Washington has seriously undermined the agreement that was reached during talks in Geneva last month, when both countries lowered tariffs on goods and imported from each other. The US has continued to unilaterally provoke new economic and trade frictions, increasing the uncertainty and instability in the bilateral economic and trade relations. The spokesperson also said that the United States' actions have severely violated the consensus that was reached during the phone call in January that was made between China's leader Xi Jinping and President Donald Trump. The Chinese Commerce Ministry said that the US accusations were seriously contrary to the facts, claiming that Beijing had strictly implemented and actively upheld the agreements, and cited its steps to cancel and suspend the certain tariff and non-tariff measures that were announced in April in response to Trump's reciprocal trade. The trade truce, which was struck in mid-May in Geneva, saw the United States lowering its tariffs imposed on goods from China from 145% down to 30%, and China's retaliatory tariffs on the United States goods dropped from 125% down to 10%. At the time, it was called a major trade breakthrough, but literally days after the tariffs were lowered, the United States issued further technology export controls on Chinese companies getting chips. And then it announced a broad sweep of measures against issuing Chinese students visas. China has in return moved very slowly on easing those rare earth mineral exports, which the United States industry desperately needs. Over the weekend, Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth warned that the threat from China in the Indo-Pacific was real and imminent.
The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not.
Now, none of this looks like the two countries are mending fences. And unlike the softer, more conciliatory approach China took to appease Donald Trump in his first administration, this time round they see themselves in a very different position, and they're playing hardball. Beijing views these actions undertaken by the United States as part of Trump's efforts to dial up the pressure on China in future trade negotiations. By contrast, it seems that the White House is deluding itself. They think they can use that same playbook and get results. Officials still expect that the two countries' leaders will hold talks very soon, some even suggesting this week. Now, Trump's "so much for being Mr. Nice Guy" comment reflects his usual characteristic transactional approach and his personal framing of all international diplomacy. It's always about him, basically. And the president thinks he will strike this master deal with President Xi himself on the phone. Now, even Treasury Secretary Bessent has said on TV interviews that details of the trade talks will be ironed out once Xi and Trump speak.
I'm confident that when President Trump and Party Chairman Xi have a call, that this will be ironed out.
Whereas the Chinese like operating in a very different way. China's governance structure relies on bottom-up negotiations, which expect a comprehensive groundwork set out before any high-level meeting.
China has demonstrated that it wants to fundamentally alter the region's status quo. We cannot look away, and we cannot ignore it. China's behavior toward its neighbors and the world is a wake-up call, and an urgent one.
Now, they may even be amenable to Trump's personalized style if they thought it would stick. But so far, they're not sure if they can rely on President Trump, who has become known as Taco. Trump always chickens out. Now, he may say one thing and then he does another. The rift between the two countries is not only about economics. It's strategic. The sharp rhetoric from the United States Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reflects clearly that the United States is not looking to work together with China. Rather, in his pointed address over the weekend, addressing the annual defense summit at the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore, he urged Asian allied nations to boost their defense spending and to push back against Beijing.
China's behavior toward its neighbors and the world is a wake-up call, and an urgent one.
Hegseth also said that the United States would prepare to fight and win against China if deterrence failed. China's defense minister, Dong Xuan, was absent at this year's summit, which is a rare departure from its tradition of dispatching the top military official to the annual event for the first time since 2019. Pete Hegseth showed his annoyance at this and said, "We are here this morning, somebody else isn't."
We are here this morning and somebody else isn't.
Beijing instead sent a lower-ranking delegation to the conference, making it clear that they were not interested in providing a gladiatorial-style engagement with the United States for entertainment in the world. Responding to Hegseth's stringent remarks, China's warned the United States not to play with fire. China's embassy in Singapore said that the United States itself is the biggest troublemaker for regional and political stability. A spokesperson for China's defense ministry criticized Hegseth on Sunday for instigating Cold War mentality. This is a remark that has been said on numerous occasions by the Chinese, the Cold War mentality that the United States is expressing. And they've also said it's severely challenging China's sovereignty and rights. China's foreign ministry issued a strong statement saying that China urges the United States to fully respect the efforts of countries in the region to maintain peace and stability, stop deliberately destroying the peaceful and stable environment cherished by the region, and stop inciting conflict and confrontation and escalating tensions in the region. According to a story in Reuters, the United States government plans to ramp up weapon sales to Taiwan to a level beyond the $18.3 billion authorized during Trump's first term, and it's surpassing the amount that's $8.4 billion, which was approved under President Biden. What the United States will do is still up for question, given that during the election campaign trail, Trump suggested that Taiwan should pay to be protected, and he also accused the island of stealing American semiconductor business, which did cause alarm in Taipei at the time. Now, the US is pushing Taiwan to increase its defense spending to 3%, and they've reportedly asked the opposition parties to agree to it. Generally, though, most Asian nations are not perceiving the same military threat from China, which the United States is telling them. And we can expect them to actually ignore most of these calls from the US to increase their defense spending. Currently, they work closely both with the United States and with China, and they don't really wish to play camp in either. Simultaneously, the diplomatic chill is hitting academia. In a move that blindsided universities across the country, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, announced sweeping restrictions on Chinese student visas, citing national security concerns. He announced that affected students will include those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. We will also revise the visa criteria to enhance scrutiny of all future visa applications from the People's Republic of China and Hong Kong. The Trump administration argues that Chinese students are a national security risk because they return to China with American know-how and that can facilitate intellectual property theft. While in the United States, members of Congress also have alleged that some Chinese students could be used in state espionage campaigns and that they pose security risks to universities that receive federal funding. On the other hand, many United States educational institutions are now warning of severe financial and reputational fallout. Chinese students, 99% of which pay full tuition, have long helped to subsidize public universities, and research labs in STEM fields are heavily reliant on their talent. Until last year, China was the biggest source of foreign students in the United States, but it has been overtaken by India as these tensions with China accumulate. There are nearly 280,000 Chinese students currently in the United States. During Trump's first administration in 2020, to stop intellectual property theft, the United States started to screen Chinese graduate students who wished to do research in the US for potential military ties. Now, they are taking it to the next level. These moves by the United States would be a disaster for the country itself. A 2022 study done by Georgetown University's Center for Security and Emerging Technology found that 90% of Chinese nationals who came to the US to study in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM fields, between the years 2000 and 2015 actually stayed and worked in the US. They graduated and they contributed to scientific fields in the country itself. And whole STEM departments in universities and research centers across the country are being run by those of Chinese origin. A research by another think tank shows that of the 25 leading American artificial intelligence companies that set up recently were founded by entrepreneurs that were born either in China or in India. Critics are arguing that this crackdown, while politically expedient, actually risks undermining American scientific leadership and diminishing one of the United States' most powerful forms of soft power. President Xi Jinping's own daughter actually went to Harvard for her undergraduate education. The technology front has been proven equally contentious. Just days after the Geneva tariff truce, the United States slapped new semiconductor export controls on Chinese firms, a move that Beijing has condemned as being discriminatory abusive of trade power. China has called out the US for discriminatory restrictions in its use of export controls in the chip industry. They said this in response to Trump's accusation that the world's second largest economy has violated a preliminary trade deal between the two countries in May. A couple of weeks ago, the Trump administration removed the Biden administration's AI diffusion rules that has set up this convoluted system of where the semiconductor chips could be sold and in which amounts. Now, the chips industry had generally been lobbying hard against these. However, when the current administration removed these, they then went on to ban American companies from importing or even using Chinese giant Huawei AI chips. They also inserted, before removing, a worldwide so-called guidance on buying these Huawei chips. Chip software makers, including Synopsys and Cadence Design Systems, said that they had received letters from the US Commerce Department telling them to stop selling to China. Now, I've done a detailed vlog on these measures and we'll put a link to it in the description, so do go and check it out. Now, these measures have reignited fears of a full-blown technological decoupling as Washington is attempting to slow down China's progress in the advanced computing section. As Washington attempts to slow down China's progress in advanced computing sector while protecting its own supply chains. But critics, including Nvidia's CEO Jensen Huang, has recently warned that such a unilateral move risks backfiring. It's going to, and it has done so, spur innovation in China, and it's going to push neutral countries to question the reliability of US technology partners. One of the major bugbears for the US side is China's control over the critical materials that are used to make chips, cars, military equipment, and so on. And it has slowed down that process to give out these licenses, the export licenses for these minerals, which is affecting United States industries. Now, these critical minerals are a powerful lever for Beijing, and it will give it a strong leverage in the trade talks that it needs. China has also narrowed the technological gap with the United States. As part of its Made in China 2025 plan, it has raced ahead in many strategic sectors, such as the renewable energy products, the robotics, and artificial intelligence. Such progress makes the country, China, less vulnerable to the United States sanctions than it would have been in the past. By late April, as tariffs started hurting major United States businesses, Walmart's, Target's, and Wall Street investors, Bill Ackman, were all making it very clear that the United States could not afford a trade war. Those sky-high tariffs on both sides were threatening to disrupt the supply chains and empty store shelves in the United States. And it was not about those girls buying $1 or $2 for Christmas, as Trump said. While Trump sent his negotiation team in May to Geneva to talk to the Chinese, he's still been acting as if he has the upper hand. Witness the United States' actions on those export controls or the Chinese student visas. Scott Besant's suggestion that a trade deal similar to that which was achieved in Trump's first administration is the model in which China upped its buying of American products and the United States still kept significant tariffs up to 25% on almost half of everything China sold to the US. Now, this is a model that he wants, but it's no longer welcomed by the Chinese this time round. That deal has become to be seen within the country as the modern-day version of those unequal treaties that the country signed during the mid-19th century, part of what China terms as its century of humiliation at the hands of foreign powers. China this time round will be aiming to keep those tariffs that it has achieved already during this 90-day pause and buying those American products that it actually wants, whether it's soybeans or American chips. For the United States, it would do well, and Trump would do well, to heed the words of JP Morgan Chase's CEO, Jamie Dimon, who recently said that China isn't America's biggest threat. And what the United States should do is to look inward. In his words, China is a potential adversary. They're doing a lot of things well, but they have a lot of problems as well. What I really worry about is us. Can we get our own act together? Our own values, our own capability, our own management.
Is a potential adversary. They're doing a lot of things well. They have a lot of problems. What I really worry about is us. Can we get our own act together, our own values, our own capability, our own management?
His remarks highlight a critical question often overshadowed by the external focus. Can the United States revitalize its economic infrastructure, innovation ecosystem, and social cohesion to remain competitive on the world stage? Yet this inward-looking counsel seems at odds with the current policy trajectory, which is basically prioritizing containment and decoupling over engagement as the solution for the United States to remain the primary superpower in the world. The risks of this hardline approach are multiple. Decoupling supply chains and limiting academic exchange threatens not only economic efficiency, but also the flow of ideas and collaboration that have historically driven innovation. Meanwhile, China is accelerating its efforts to develop indigenous technologies, diversifying its trade partnerships, and strengthening its regional influence. All actions that could ultimately diminish American leverage in global affairs. Now, in this context, any upcoming leadership dialogues between President Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, if they indeed take place, will be pivotal. Can they break through this current impasse? It depends heavily on the groundwork laid by their respective bureaucracies and on mutual willingness to compromise beyond those transactional optics that are happening. Both countries do face that domestic pressures that will constrain their flexibility. In the United States, we have political polarization and strategic hawks that want that all-out confrontation. In China, it has its own nationalistic expectations, and the leadership needs to ensure the protection of its sovereignty and core interests. Thank you for giving me your time today, and do share with me your thoughts. Do you think Trump is right that a phone call will be the solution to resolving this impasse? Have a great day.